Your language is a bit like a cake. Now, stay with me on this. I'm going to explain why, and it's going to help you to understand how to get a better score in the IELTS test and just generally how to be a better language learner. Hi, I'm Nick, and for everything IELTS, make sure you follow my channel. So let's get back to the cake and imagine two cakes. One quite a basic cake like this, and one a fancy cake like this with lots of decoration on top and fancy bits. So this fancy language is things like idioms, like when we say once in a blue moon, or phrasal verbs like give up, take up. There are hundreds of phrasal verbs. Or maybe some complex fancy grammar like the third conditional. Now, this basic cake represents your basic language. So simple sentences, basic collocations like take a picture instead of make or do a picture. Using correct tenses. So for example, simple past tenses or third person S, like I go, you go, she goes. That's a really common mistake in English. Now, it's really important to get this basic language right before you start putting the fancy stuff on top and you start decorating it with this fancy language. And what happens quite a lot is I'll get students coming to me saying, Nick, I need to learn some fancy language for the IELTS test that I'm taking soon. And I'm like, sure, okay, we can learn some higher level language, no problem. But first of all, let's check the rest of your language. And we do a bit of speaking. And sometimes they're ready for this higher level language. But sometimes I notice that there are problems with past tenses. There are problems with third person singular, like he go, she like. There are problems with plurals. Now, those are quite fundamental foundation mistakes. So if you're using lots of fancy idioms, but you're also making these quite basic mistakes, then things don't really work. And if we go back to the idea of a cake, then you've got all this fancy decoration on your cake, but you don't have the solid base and everything just kind of falls in and it doesn't really work. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you can't learn any idioms or phrasal verbs or fancy language unless you're 100% correct on your foundations. Of course you can. Language is not linear, right? So you don't have to have everything absolutely perfect before you start learning your first idiom or phrasal verb. You can do these at the same time. But what I'm saying is don't neglect the basics. Make sure you're coming back to these regularly and checking that they're solid and not letting them slip. Then you can start building, you can start decorating, making that fancy cake and getting those higher grades on the IELTS speaking test. And once you do that, the test is a piece of cake, right?